I call the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the LNP has the right priorities for Queensland's future. And we have the right priorities because we have spent the time listening to Queenslanders. Every member of this team has been in every part of this state, and we have listened to brave Queenslanders as they have told us their stories. And their stories have formed what will be the blueprint for shaping the right priorities for years to come in Queensland. Mr Deputy Speaker, in contrast, what we have seen from the government has been a chaotic period of chaos and crisis, of undermining, of backstabbing, of a complete and utter void of leadership. And what disappointed me most is when I heard the Premier refer to this as the wrong priorities. Well, I want to ask the Premier, what in this document are the wrong priorities? Which are the wrong priorities? Is it making our community safer? Is that what the Premier believes is the wrong priorities? Mr Deputy Speaker, youth crime is out of control. Fewer police, weaker laws. It's why there is a youth crime crisis. And the Premier no longer has the priority of keeping Queenslanders safe. Mr Deputy Speaker, today we heard from Jen, a constituent from Arana Hills, who told her story about what life was like to have her home invaded, to have to follow it on social media to see a system where there aren't consequences for actions. Jen is just one of thousands of Queenslanders, and since the government's knee-jerk reaction, over 50 cars are stolen every day. Over 130 properties get broken into every day. And our priority is about increasing the number of police on the beat and giving them the laws to do their job. What other priorities does the Premier believe are wrong? Easier access to health services? Is that what the Premier says are the wrong priorities? Mr Deputy Speaker, ambulance ramping in this state is the worst in the nation. It was 15% when this government came to office. It had already doubled before COVID. It is at 45%, and it is now 24 days overdue, and we still don't know the latest data. Is it back to 15%? Is it no longer the worst in the country? Because our priority is to heal this crisis. Our priority is to enable young women to have a baby where, when and how they choose. That's what priorities look like. Empowering local decision-making and ensuring that healthcare professionals are in charge at the coalface. What about saving you paying for Labor's failures? Does the Premier not believe that should be a priority? Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, Queenslanders are tired of seeing their hard-earned taxpayer dollars frittered away by a government that has given up treating their money with respect, a government that has introduced 15 new taxes, and a government that has spent billions of dollars in cost overruns on projects. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Minister for Transport wouldn't make smoko time in a government where the Premier hadn't checked out. He wouldn't make smoko time. How a minister can survive what this one has, it would be laughable if Queenslanders weren't paying for it. The LNP's priorities ensure reducing Labor government waste rather than hitting Queenslanders with higher taxes and fees, delivering better services and infrastructure for every taxpayer dollar invested. That's what our priorities are for Queensland. And for the minister who nearly 3 months ago deliberately withheld a $2.4 billion cost overrun from Queensland.
Order. Pause the clock. Pause the clock. The House will come to order. Member for Miller, what is your point of order?
I take personal offence in those comments and I ask they be withdrawn.
Order. The member's taken personal offence. I ask you to withdraw.
I withdraw, Mr.
You have the call.
Speaker. Like a cup that has been reused too many times, that excuse is wilting. $2.4 billion. $2.4 billion. And for the minister to somehow believe that you can withhold information like that from Queenslanders and not be held accountable just shows this government has given up on ensuring that Queenslanders don't have to pay for Labor's...
Point of order.
Pause the clock. The House will come to order. Member for Miller, what's your point of order?
I take personal offence to those comments. He knows they aren't accurate. I ask
Order,
they be withdrawn.
members. Order.
He knows they're not accurate, and I ask they be withdrawn.
The House will come to order. I'm just going to take some advice. Order. Member for Miller, I only heard a reference to the government. I didn't hear a reference to you personally. So at this point, I won't be ruling there's a point of order. I call the member for Broadwater.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. A $2.4 billion momentary lapse of concentration. Mr Deputy Speaker, it was deliberate, it was calculated, and no one has been held accountable. The LNP intends to ensure that Queenslanders don't have to pay for Labor's failures. What about securing our housing foundations? Is that a wrong priority? Is it a wrong priority to want vulnerable Queenslanders to have a roof over their head? Is it a wrong priority to not want to see the community housing sector continue to go backwards, the only state in the nation that it has? Is it a wrong priority to want Queenslanders to own their own home? Mr Deputy Speaker, when I see a generation of Queenslanders who have given up on the great Australian dream, and to know that it's become a nightmare for them, I know that this state could do so much better. Yeah. And at 64%, Queensland's home ownership is the lowest in the country. The lowest in the country. We want to have ambition in this state. We want kids to believe in aspiration. And within 10 years, we intend to go from bottom place to first. Yeah. And I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, I have to say... That's not...
Order, members! Order! Order, members! You have the call.
Mr Deputy Speaker, when I sat in a room with the member for Southport and listened to young Queenslanders who said that they do not believe that they have any hope of owning their own home within 10 years, I know that there is a better way in this state. I know that. These were young people. They were either studying university or employed, and the vast majority of them didn't believe they would ever be able to own their own home. Well, they should be able to. And I am so pleased to say that there'll be a single point of accountability to make sure that taxation,
Order, Treasurer.
incentives...
You're on the speaking list next.
Everything is on the table when it comes to fixing the housing crisis. Yeah. And we are determined...
Order, Treasurer.
When it comes to taxation and incentives, we will make sure that every option is analysed. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, here's a prediction. Here's a prediction, Mr Deputy Speaker. By budget time, watch the Treasurer skulk in here. Watch it at budget time. Watch him skulk in here and talk about thresholds and incentives. Remember this. Watch it happen. Because we have seen it...
Order, members.
Watch
Order.
another humiliating back down. Because this is a Treasurer.
Order, Treasurer.
This is a
Treasurer. Order, Treasurer.
Mr Deputy Speaker.
That's following. That's not leadership.
Mr Deputy Speaker, what is a wrong priority about working harder for Queenslanders? How is it the Premier can say that wanting to re-establish integrity in government is a bad thing? When you have a report from Professor Coldrake who talks about a culture of entrenched fear, of ministerial advisors walking around like little generals, independent public servants bullied. That's when you know government is broken in this state. And the LNP has a focus to make sure that we are working harder for Queenslanders to give them integrity in government and the government they deserve. Mr Deputy Speaker, in question time today, we saw a government with the wrong priorities. We saw a government scrambling to make an announcement. And what we saw in those text messages, and we now know that Stephen M is the Deputy Premier, shock reveal, what we saw in those text messages from the highest level of government, we saw no plan, we saw no strategy, but you know what was worse? We saw no compassion. Absolutely none. This was in the shadow of one of the most horrific crimes in somebody's home that you had ever seen, and the response was about an advertising campaign. An advertising campaign that the Premier didn't even bother to look at when she got back. And that shows you how this government views everything. This is a government that views everything through the optics of their survival and nothing through the priorities of Queenslanders' survival. And, Mr Deputy Speaker, there is only one side of this House that has been listening, and there is only one side of this